God, it has been 8 actual months and over 1,000 subscribers since I last talked about Helluva boss on this channel. Partly because nobody watched my first video, but mostly because I've been waiting to really have something to say on the matter. But after the 1-2 punch of the full moon and apology tour left me and everyone else on the internet with some
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
complicated feelings, I decided I need to work through them here. I know by the time this video goes up, it'll have been about 2 weeks since the last episode was posted, but I was busy working on my video for Pride Month, and it wouldn't be a true Right and Real Slow video if I wasn't late to the conversation. Right, so let's talk about the disaster gaze, shall we? So, I know that a lot of the conversation has been revolving around who's to blame for the breakup of the Helluverse's most problematic couple, and I've seen a fair amount of people heaping blame on one while defending the other, so let me just get my thesis statement out of the way. Blitz and Stolitz share the blame on this one. What's more, this break was inevitable, and it was also the only way the two would ever be able to move forward to an actually functional relationship. Because we all know Stolitz is the intended endgame, and this breakup and breakdown going on right here, this is only the first step in the process of them healing and growing into something healthy and whole. Yeah, I know, bold claim. I will back it up. I'll speed through the summary because I assume that if you're watching this, you're decently familiar with what's been going on, and if not, well, the show's on YouTube and free to watch. Go watch it now. I'll still be here when you get back, probably. So, Stolitz finally gave Blitz the Asmodean crystal and confessed his feelings, which Blitz didn't believe at first because, of course he didn't, and things just devolved from there.
What the fuck?
Smash cut to the next episode, and the very next day, yeah, this whole thing takes place over a single 24-hour period. It's pretty rough when you think about it. And Blitz climbs Stolitz's walls, confronts him, pushing his boundaries and upsetting him beyond anything we've ever seen.
As shocking as this might seem, Blitz, I don't think I'm in the mood to do sex with you. In fact, I don't think I'm even in the mood to do words with you. Oh, this will be fun. I love words.
Oh, he is upset. Stolitz reveals he's been invited to Veroska's annual fuck Blitz but not in a sexy way party. The fight escalates and Blitz accidentally shows vulnerability.
For what? You want me to be like, oh, sorry, this entire time I assumed the worst because I was convinced a prince could never love someone like me and I've let my self-hatred stop me from apologizing to anyone I could never care about.
Don't worry, he backpedals real quick by lashing out.
Well, yes, that.
Well, fuck you!
And then begins his apology tour, and oh my god, that's the name of the episode! He makes it to the hate party just in time for the single best song of the entire show. And is finally forced to confront the fact that he legitimately hurt someone who cared for him. An important fact, and we'll come back to that. And after a short conversation with an extremely drunk Stolitz, decides that he both needs to and wants to change. And the episode just ends on him contemplating his mistakes. It's a heavy, somber ending, and honestly, I fucking love it. It's about time we finally got here. Plus, it's cool that Veroska is finally relevant to the story again. I've been waiting for that to happen since Aussies. Also, did Blitz fuck Wally? I don't want to believe it, but the chances are more than 0. So where does this leave us, anyway? It's understandable to want to put the blame on someone for this, but it's not quite as simple as that. To understand where we go next, we have to understand how we got here, and that requires a look at our two sad boys. I think we should start with Stolitz, as it feels the easiest to blame him for a lot of this. He is, after all, the one who started this whole thing. He's the one who suggested the sex grimoire exchange, he's the one who sprung his feelings on Blitz, and he's the one who cut off the conversation when Blitz was finally talking about his feelings. Stolitz's problem in this scenario, well, it stems from trauma and neglect, but the root of the problem in the full moon is that he's been grappling with his feelings for Blitz and preparing for their conversation for a good deal of time, but he never really communicated these feelings to Blitz, or at least not directly. And yeah, it's been obvious to us, the audience, that he's been displaying deeper feelings for Blitz for quite some time, but we have the benefit of seeing both sides of the conflict from our seat behind the fourth wall. And because Stolitz doesn't benefit from the same understanding of the situation that we do, he can't possibly understand just how damaged Blitz is. And trust me, I'll get to that as well. From Stolitz's limited perspective, he only knows Blitz as this incredibly deadly and skilled imp that was his first and only friend, and the man that gave him the push he needed to escape Stella.
That was the sound of a Fat King divorce!
And the man who's been his only real source of sexual and emotional release. He doesn't know the lonely, broken soul who suffered from neglect, abuse and abandonment. What's more, he's just not fully aware of the power imbalance between them. He realizes that the transactional nature of their relationship is wrong and that it forces Blitz to be tied to him for his livelihood, but he's unaware of these systematic differences. The racism towards imps, the difference in class and status, things that Blitz is constantly made aware of because of Hell's caste system. Of course, none of this is to say that Blitz is innocent. He was the one who continually and aggressively ignored Stolitz's pleas to be left alone and to be respected. He was the one who insulted and belittled Stolitz's feelings, and lest we forget, he was the one who re-entered Stolitz's life to steal his grimoire, only to lie to him and play it off like he was there specifically for him. And despite it being during a moment of extreme emotions, he was the one who lashed out and took out all of his anger on Stolitz in a moment of reflexive defensiveness. Much like Stolitz, Blitz lacks the awareness that the audience has. He didn't know that Stolitz had developed actual romantic feelings for him. He doesn't know what kind of life Stolitz has been living since they were children, and he had no idea how hard Stolitz was working to make their relationship fair. As far as he knew, Stolitz was only interested in him for sex, because that was the basis of their entire adult relationship. And these two dipshits suffer from a terminal case of being terrible at communicating. And shit communication is the death knell of any and all relationship. But to truly understand where they're coming from, we need to discuss everyone's favourite two topics, trauma and abuse. See, this is why everyone loves me. So the thing about Blitz and Stolitz is that they're both victims of some genuinely horrible childhood abuse and neglect, and both are carrying extreme trauma from the events of their lives that the other just isn't aware of. Like, it's literally not until apology tour that the two even get a glimpse of the habits and tendencies that exist as a side effect of the pain they're carrying. Stolitz finally gets a peek at Blitz's insecurity and self-hatred.
Oh, sorry, this entire time I assumed the worst because I was convinced a prince could never love someone like me, and I've let my self-hatred stop me from apologizing to anyone I could never care about.
And Blitz gets to see Stolitz's self-destructive coping mechanisms.
Wow. I've never seen you throw him back like this.
Came just to judge me, is that it?
Which neither of them have ever actually seen before, because until now, they've only seen each other at their best or their busiest. Well, I say best, but it's mostly been their most distracted and horniest. And there is a lot these two need to unpack, because until they actually have a frank discussion about what they've been through and where they're coming from, they're never going to have a solid starting point for their relationship. So let's talk about that, shall we? We'll start with Stolitz again. The thing about Stolitz is that while he definitely had a far more privileged upbringing, he's suffered some truly awful abuse, not just at the hands of Stella, but by his own father. Neglect is a form of abuse, and Stolitz was a definite victim of emotional neglect. Paimon didn't even remember his name, refuses to spend time with him, and both physically and verbally abuses him. It's made pretty clear that Stolitz's emotional needs barely even register to the people around him, and he's also obviously incredibly lonely, considering he's never even had a friend before Blitz. And then there's the whole thing with his fucking bitch of an ex-wife. Stella is, by far, one of the very worst characters in the entirety of the show. She spent the better part of 25 years emotionally and very possibly physically abusing him throughout the duration of their
non-negotiable future marriage.
She's created an environment of endless torment for him, and that was before Blitz showed up. Stolitz has only ever had two positive relationships in his life, and one of them is with his daughter. He is a gay man who's been forced to live a life he never had a say in, that was incompatible with his sexuality and sense of self, and the only reason he was able to escape it was because of Blitz. Blitz served as Stolitz's awakening in multiple ways, awakening his sexuality, bolstering his confidence, and even serving as the catalyst for his divorce with Stella, as before Blitz showed up, Stolas had pretty obviously resigned himself to being miserable forever. And this is where his problems stem from, because he's literally never experienced love or friendship outside of Blitz until now. This nameless dude that asks him to dance, to the best of our knowledge, he's the only other man to ever show interest in Stolitz. He's probably the only other man to show actual care for him, and you know what? I think it's good that he's here. Not only is he giving Stolitz a taste of what he could have, of what he could have had all along if things had gone differently, but he also serves as a wake-up call for Blitz, who, until now, has never had to contend with the idea that he could lose Stolitz. It is painfully obvious that Stolitz is still in love with Blitz, given the way that, even while drunk, he covers Blitz's head and leads him to a more secluded area of the party, and by how he checks with Blitz before he accepts. Okay, does anyone actually know this guy's name? Has it been announced anywhere? No, I'm just call him Dave for the rest of the video. Before he accepts Dave's invitation. Stolitz isn't over Blitz yet. I mean, it's literally only been 24 hours since the breakup as of the end of Apology Tour, and his dalliance with Dave isn't going to change that. This is still really good, and I'll get into that a little bit more after I talk about Blitz. So the thing about Blitz is that he's been set up to fail in relationships since he was a kid, because he's had to deal with being unwanted for his whole life. He suffered through a childhood of neglect as well, and I lay the vast majority of this on his shithead of a father. I think it's implied that his mother was sick or otherwise largely incapacitated throughout his childhood, since his dad is able to use her to guilt Blitz into stealing from Stolitz's family. But as of right now, we just don't know very much about her. His dad though, Satan almighty, fuck cash bucks though with a cactus and a toaster. He's undisguised in his disdain for his own son, literally sells him for $5 in a condom, and openly wishes that Fizz was his child instead. Blitz likely grew up feeling that he had to earn his father's love, and it was clearly never going to be enough. I theorized a while back that it was Cash that told Blitz and Fizz that neither wanted to see the other and therefore drove a wedge between them after the fire, and I really hope we find out if that's the case when we finally see him again. Either way, I hope Luna bites his fucking face off. And then of course, there's the fire. By complete accident, and I'd honestly argue it was Cash's fault for not prepping the circus with any fire safeties. Holy shit, this thing goes up so fast. Blitz burns down the circus tent on Fitzgerald's birthday, which inadvertently scarred Fitz and ended up killing his mother. A terrible and tragic act that would spell the death of his relationship to his family and friends, as Fizz, Cash and Molly would go on to blame him for everything, leaving him quite literally alone in the world, completely unwanted and thoroughly traumatized. The thing about Blitz is that, due to how he was raised and how he lost his family, he's come to believe that he's completely unlovable, because it was drilled into his head again and again that he was unwanted. He just can't allow himself to believe someone might love him or to admit that he cares for other people, because he's terrified that anyone new will just be a repeat of his family. And the thing is, when you spend as long as he has getting the idea that you're unlovable and unworthy beaten into you, it tends to stick with you for a very long time. Blitz is afraid to love people and to let them love him, because he's terrified of being hurt again, and that's what's led to so many situations like Verosica, where he gets scared and preemptively ends it himself. It's a defense mechanism. But at the same time, he desperately wants to love and be loved, and it's thanks to this self-perpetuating bullshit cycle that he keeps failing out of relationships and hurting people because of how deeply he's been hurt himself. To be clear, this is an explanation, not an excuse. Just because you've been hurt and have trauma, that doesn't mean that you have any sort of excuse for inflicting pain on others. Blitz is very good at deflecting and protecting his ego, making excuses and getting angry, and invoking pity in others, and all of this has been to keep from having to examine the pain he feels and causes.
Oh, you are so fucking shitty! Do you hear yourself?
Everyone's shitty! Hello, we live in hell! Why am I all of a sudden the bad guy just for sucking at relationships?
I've known a lot of people like Blitz before, people who use their own pain and mistreatment as an excuse to hurt others without a shred of remorse. I've been hurt by people like this, and much like Verosica, I was made to feel like the bad guy for getting mad at them. But the difference between these people and Blitz is that Blitz has finally recognized he was wrong and he wants to change. He wants to be better. And all of this is simply the first step towards that betterment. Also, Blitz doesn't use his past as an excuse to be transphobic, so there's that. The first step is always acknowledging that you have a problem and deciding to fix it. And that's where Blitz and Stolas finally are, now that all of this is in the open. They're finally ready to take that next step, because Stolitz can no longer hide what he wants, and Blitz can no longer look past the pain he's caused people. The worst thing about loneliness is that you can't cure it by yourself. Loneliness, true loneliness, is a cold, crushing farce that grips your heart and head and squeezes you until you're as empty inside as the feeling itself. And the only way to escape is to have someone, anyone, reach out their hand and pull you from that brink. I think that's why Veraska began to organize these parties, to be that gentle hand that helps guide people back into the light. Something she desperately wished she had when Blitz broke up with her. And for Blitz and Stolas, that's what the next step is going to be. They'll have to be that for each other if they're ever going to move on from the pit of misery they find themselves in. I think that when Stolas told Blitz what it was he truly wanted, that was the point that Blitz realised just how much he cares for Stolas, and just how much they have in common. Honestly, what we all have in common with Stolas.
The point is, I just want someone to care if I stay or go. I want someone to want me, to want to see me, to hold me, look at me and think, well, you're the only one I want. I desire to hold you and talk to you, never let you feel so.
We all want someone who cares, whether platonically or romantically, whether you're aloe or error ace. Everyone wants someone who makes you feel like you belong, that you're irreplaceable and loved, and that you'll be missed. It's a harrowing thought, and one I've had all too often throughout my life, that you won't be missed. That if you just disappeared, nobody would care, and nobody would wonder, and nobody would cry. And that's something that, in this scene, Blitz realizes he shares with Stolas. I think Blitz realized during the show that he had actually legitimately hurt Stolas, something he didn't think was possible. But it wasn't until here that he realized exactly how he'd hurt him, that he was confronted with the realization that he'd made Stolas feel the same kind of hurt that he'd been forced to endure his whole life. Here though, he's seeing Stolas, really seeing Stolas for the first time, and he's realizing that he really does care about him, and it hurts. Blitz has cared about Stolitz for a long time now, but he hasn't let himself explore that feeling because he's terrified of losing him. That's why he looks so horrified when he realizes Stolitz can actually be hurt, because it brought to mind the possibility that he could lose another person he cares about. That's why when they have their fight, he actually starts to apologize before he's magicked out of the mansion. It's why he wouldn't just take the Asmodean crystal and fuck off, and had to keep trying to get Stolitz to take him back, despite his ego and years of ingrained and reflexive defense mechanisms getting in the way. Because he does care, and he does want Stolitz to want him too. He just hasn't been forced to confront the truth of, well, everything until now. And from here, well, now that it's all out in the open, now they can finally start over. They're going to need time, obviously, and they're going to have to work on themselves. But eventually, these two are going to drift back together, bound by a gravity all their own. And when they finally do, when they finally hold people by themselves, that's when they're going to be so good for each other. You know, I saw some dipshit on Twitter complaining that the show was focusing on the relationship between these two and not the fact that the Dirks have a hell portal. And can I just ask, does anyone actually think that matters right now? Vivzie isn't an idiot. She's not going to drop the emotional core of the story to focus on something that isn't even a threat to IMP, let alone the rest of hell. Here's my prediction as a fellow writer. Viv is going to wait until the two are about to reconcile to activate the hell portal to raise the stakes even higher. And it won't be remotely important until the time of maximum payoff. I can't fully blame the idiot though, because Viv pulled a fast one on us all. She kind of billed Helluva Boss as some kind of animated equivalent to The Office, and then once we were all in too deep and invested to pull out, she tore off the mask and yelled, "Fooled you, it's about sad gay people!" Honestly, I respect the hell out of her for it. Blitz and Stolas are going to need time, but they'll get there. I have to believe that because I can't watch these two heartbroken morons suffer much longer. My heart goes out to these disaster gays and their fucked up infernal love story. Also, get the fuck off Dave's back, people. He's done literally nothing wrong. Also, he's really kinda hot.